Shama Kali Mahakali Devi Kali O Kali Kali O Kali Kali O Kali.
Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvaititam Gaganasadrisham Tattvamashadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Bimalamatchalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sagalam Jagadcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is one without a second, pure and perfect. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavo Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings or with the world, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. It is the subject of Shakta Advaita Vada. Shakta meaning that divine energy, Shakti, which is in all of us all, also points directly to the presence of the Divine Mother of the universe. Call her Kali or Durga or Saraswati, Parvati, and by other august names that she goes by, hundreds and thousands of them really, in stotrams that are sung in temples all around India and in other parts of the world. Even we, our very selves, will be singing one of them this month on Christmas Eve, which happens to also be Holy Mother's birthday, Sri Sharda Devi's birthday. Today is also, by the way, Bodhi Day. It's when the Zen Buddhists celebrate the awakening of Lord Buddha. A little bit different than the rest of the Buddhist schools. All the Buddhist schools have different days, I think. Basically, it's known, he's known as the thrice blessed one, born, went into nirvana and got his enlightenment on a full moon, 3 different full moons. So He's often called the thrice blessed one, but of course Buddhism appears in various locations because of that wonderful spread of that very pure and perfect religion as it went from on foot, mostly carried by monks and mendicants to different parts of the world, so that we have all sorts of strains of Buddhism now, but basically all based on the Four Noble Truths and the doctrine of interdependent arising and the 12 links, nidanas, to the rebirth principle, reincarnation it's called. So anyway, today we acknowledge Lord Buddha too, as we often do here. We had even a Zen retreat here a few months back, where many of us gathered and dressed in black and went through a lot of the Buddhist teachings that are there in the scriptures, many scriptures that are available to us of that darshana. And darshana is one of the things we'll be talking about today, because that's where we left off last week with this chart on your right called Astika and Nastika. But if we want to first show the chart on the left, re-show it, that is, we see that Astika and Nastika are parts of these two pillars, in which are surrounding her, holding up this throne that she sits on, as it were, and also along with other great concomitants of India's darshanas, like moksha. We talked about a liberation of the kind that's already at hand. It's not something that can be gained through practice or through time, through purification. We went through all of that last week, if you remember. The true meaning of moksha, also word they use is mukti. So moksha is there on one of her pillars as a very high level of attainment, if you will, because it can't be attained, I just said, so I'm already contradicting myself. But on a qualified non-dual level, it's something that we reach for. It's as we speak of Lord Buddha, he said, Gatam, Gatam, Paragatam. We go beyond all goals, Gatam, to the Paragatam, to the supreme goal. So it is okay for the human being to think in terms of goals. We would call them in Hinduism or in Vedanta avastas, or stages. We talked about it this morning, actually, in satsang, that the soul goes from stage to stage and qualifies itself for higher knowledge, higher wisdom, and finally for non-dual truth and samadhi. So that's also here on the chart. We've talked about samadhi last week in terms of the 4 types of seated samadhis, if you remember, that the father of yoga had taught us. Savitarka and Savichara, with their Nirvitarka concomitants, Nirvichara concomitants, and then Sananda and Sasmita. These are basically samadhis of wisdom and inner wisdom and bliss, samadhis of bliss, and then samadhis of cosmic I-ness or I-amness. These are all seated samadhis, the last one having just the tiniest tendril of the sense of I left in the human being. It's been so purified, senses, body, mind, and finally ego. When one finally, as he said in some of the quotes we took last week, purifies the ego and ripens it and turns it into one with the Father. So all of a sudden you've transcended individuality of all types, whether that be unripe ego or even ripe ego, and you're beginning to, like the line, turning into a line in a space and a line in a space. If you want to put it in sign language, that's a pun there, S-I-N-E, sign language. We know that the distracted mind is erratic like that. And then the sometimes distracted, sometimes concentrated mind is peaks and valleys. See? It'll be even for a while. It's called sattva. And we'll have to look at the gunas here pretty soon. They're here on the pillar too. Probably get to that next week. So sattva is that guna of balance, and rajas is the guna of restlessness that it accosts the mind, and also slothfulness or laziness that accosts the mind. That's the third guna. So sometimes that valley is like a peak, higher consciousness, and then the flat line is evenness, and then the dip is depression, or sometimes restlessness that wears you out. Could even be a valley, or leading to a valley. So we talked about that in terms of the 4 samadhis and how the mind becomes flatline. It is dead to all negative suggestion. That's the kind of death you want, is to die to things that are erratic and cause suffering, as we first noble truth of Lord Buddha. Or actually that's the second noble truth. Suffering is the first noble truth. Let me clarify that. And then there's a cause for it. It's the second noble truth. So those gunas, you could put them in a good category for blaming. See, oh, it's the guna's fault. See, my mind is constantly going through these modes. Well, all minds do. There's even the dark night of the soul of the very enlightened mind, because they're looking at your suffering as a individual, as a race, as a culture, as a world, because there are many worlds inside, many heavens in the kingdom of God. So when they look at like that, their mind gets despondent, their mind gets a little restless. And Swami Vivekananda was in a divine restlessness all the time, trying to figure out the problems of this world in the brief 39 years that he was amongst us, and only several of those were spent in the West. So those people who saw him pacing a lot and thinking, and it wasn't a restlessness that was negative. It was cracking open the great problems and bringing higher solutions like these to us, so that I could sit here, some certain amount of decades later and begin to teach this dharmic transmission to people as other teachers are doing in their different traditions. It's just that in Vedanta and in Tantra and in Buddhism and all these darshanas in India, you can go on talking and talking for lifetimes and not really get to get it all accomplished. It's eternal, like the soul, like consciousness, like the worlds, like your own soul. This wisdom is eternal. So therefore, we come to the conclusion that we should probably just be dipping our mind in it over and over again, if not just once a week like we're doing here Sunday, but also at home once a day, just to check in with the teachings as if on some sort of a dharmic roulette wheel, where that marble is spinning of the mind and it's going to settle in a particular slot with a particular cosmic number at any given time, and on that day you pick up the scriptures, you'll have a revelation that will be key to your spiritual life. Where on other days you might pick it up and the tamas and the rajas in your mind might be not permitting you to have that kind of experience. So constancy was is one of Divine Mother's favorite qualities. She likes perseverance, and she likes purity, and she likes practice. The 3 P's. So if you can put those together, that is, practice constantly and try and gain a pure mind, chit, shuddhi, then you'll start having these kinds of samadhis. They may come to you before you even know you're in them. All of a sudden, one day, like the Indian poet, you'll wake up and say, this day I woke up this morning and my ignorance was gone, utterly gone. Who can veil the truth? Who can keep a blazing fire tied in a cotton cloth? So the truth will suggest itself to you through wisdom teachings. That's, by the way, what the West is missing. We're getting a lot of faith-based tradition, some of it mixed with fundamentalism and other of a higher nature, but we're not getting a lot of the wisdom transmitted to us, and that's where when you see souls, Americans, Europeans, and so forth, running for the East, then you shouldn't step forward and blame them for abandoning your religion, like, say, in the West, because they're looking for something of substance that will help them fly. And you know what I mean by that. The bird needs 2 wings to fly. And my teacher was always repeating that teaching, so I might as well too. Bhakti and Jnanam, devotion and wisdom. Wisdom keeps devotion from getting too sentimental, and devotion keeps wisdom from getting too dry. So if you put them together, they'll check each other, and then your spiritual life can take flight. The soul can actually take flight. So it's a ancient teaching set in stone in India, that this wisdom portion of the transmission is very important. It's the only thing that will destroy ignorance. Bhakti has to be, that is, devotion has to be very intense and very pure for it to destroy your ignorance, says Narada in the Bhakti Sutras. So, but knowledge can be even of a higher nature, a dharmic nature, and your ignorance will start to erode right away. You're talking about something that's broaching the truth, you see, that's leading you to the truth. And Vivekananda says, I can compare truth to the most corrosive substance in the universe. It will burn through everything. Soft things quickly, harder things, it'll take more time. But it will burn through. So there is that importance, or the import of perseverance. You keep taking these teachings again and again, even if your ego-mind mechanism, as we say in Vedanta, sometimes complains about it. You say, oh, that's too much, or it's too much words, or it's too much of scripture and so forth. The point isn't that you can learn it all in one lifetime. I just said it was eternal. It just keeps going on and on. The point is to expose yourself to it so you find that combination of the right moment, auspicious timing, and the right teaching, and the openness of the mind in a particular guna. Like it's open on a particular time only when sattva visits it, and that's when the teaching comes. And if you didn't keep persevering and reading the scriptures every day and so forth, you'd miss that time. You'd miss that important time. Same with your meditations. Holy Mother said, if you have 365 meditations a year, and 50 of them are good, and many others are not so good, but 12 of them are perfectly timed with the cosmic clock to transmit to you something essential for your spiritual life, but you didn't keep up 365 times a year, you might have missed those 12, and therefore let yourself out the back door and not being able to use these teachings in the way they're meant. They're meant to linger inside the mind. Manana. So first Shravana, here, Manana, then roll it over and over in your mind. That might be for days, for weeks, for years. Some of them even for lifetimes, in the case of some subtle non-dual teachings, until that right combination of things happens. And that's back to the avastas, the stages again. As you reach a certain stage, it's very unlikely you're going to fall back from it. You've attained that ground, and it's not a sunken ground anymore. You see, it's a more elevated ground, and you like it there, and you acclimatize to it, and that's your default zone. And then through the weeks and months and years of your sadhana, you attain the next higher level and the next higher level until finally, I feel fine, thank you. My ignorance is gone, 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 utterly gone. And the truth is becoming more and more apparent to me all the time. And now it's just a matter of perseverance until the truth dawns on me and sets me free. So what I'm saying here, and I'm speaking mostly to a Western audience, I think, is that we probably should get over that habit of quick fix, that we want everything quickly and right away, like we can get other things in an opulent society. We need to take the, pardon the expression, old-fashioned way in terms of scriptures and teachings and gurus and dharma, and look back into this perennial truth that is constant and dip ourselves into it over and over and over again. Like a stream running outside your back door. Go outside every day, jump in, clean yourself off, come back in, go to work. Next day do the same thing. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell a funny story about the man who headed for the Ganges River with all the vulture sins perched on his shoulder. All the sins that he had committed throughout the days and months of his life were like vultures perched on his shoulders. As soon as they saw the Ganges, they flew off, perched in nearby trees, and the man bathed himself and came out all free and pure of his sins. But as soon as he left the proximity of the Ganges River, the vultures came flying back and lit on his shoulders again. So to purge yourself of sin for all time, these transgressions, is to make your abode on the banks of the river and make sure that you dip into it every day. That's what the seers have done, and that's why they're in a state of samadhi. So they go into these states of lower samadhis, middling samadhis, higher samadhis, and then occasionally, because they keep their mind in that kind of samadhi, they will have occasionally an experience of asampragyata, or nirvikalpa over here, that we talked about last week. They will have an experience of non-duality that's very stunning. Sometimes they call that jada samadhi. And we think probably Buddha and Christ, to name a few, went into it under the bo tree or in the wilderness for those 40 days. Seems like 40 days is a good amount of days to put yourself into practice for that highest state of non-duality, because they got stunned and sat for a long time. See, and it wasn't a matter of austerity, because Buddha had already done all his austerities before he sat like that. Finally, he just sat under the tree, and everything revealed itself over time, over that 40 or 50-day sit that he had. And Christ, too, in the wilderness became stunned with what he saw inside, and birds pecked grains out of his hair, so he must have sat there a long time for grains to gather in his scalp under that tree, whatever tree that was, another form of the Bodhi tree. So we know that this is the case, and it relates to us the import of perseverance and practice. But this exposure first, you have to be exposed to it all. So those are some of the things we brought forward last week in terms of nirvikalpa samadhi, or sampragyata samadhi, and salvikalpa samadhi and sampragyata samadhi, the seated samadhis. And then we talked about moksha, being a state always at hand, instead of looking at it as something I'm going to attain in the future, like, as my teacher used to say, with a post-mortem emancipation. I do not care for a post-mortem emancipation, is what he used to say. So he had realized the eternal nature of liberation. Just like that river you would dip in. It's always running through you, but you're failing to recognize it. You could call it an underground river, so it needs to be detected by things that are appearing on the surface. A certain line of trees or marshes that are growing on the surface, then you could dig in that area and there's water. So there's an underground river running in every being, and that's that river of this constant freedom. And that's why we all yearn for it, especially after a certain time in the body, when it becomes clear to us that pleasures and objects, sense objects and so forth, cannot fulfill us, that they're not real, as the Vedanta says. Quantum physics actually agrees with that. It hasn't made that conclusion yet, emotionally, psychologically, but it does know that everything is consisting of vibrating particles, changing at a billionth of a second. So it doesn't sound like a very stable world. So therefore you can't get attached to it, and you can't get satisfaction or satiation from it. What you need to do is return to this state of eternal bliss inside of you. They call that word ananda. So that is what one of the final samadhis is, the samadhi of ananda. It's called sananda, with bliss. And that ripens the ego to a full extent because it allows it to see the difference between its individual bliss and the bliss of Brahman. And when it sees that, sort of like looking at the moon and seeing that it shines by borrowed light, and then turning to the sun and saying, oh, that's got its own light, that's when the soul turns from its individual bliss to this eternal bliss that it espies when it goes into or puts itself in the periphery of non-duality. It's a very steep slope there, very subtle, easy to slip and fall. So you attain that by stages too. So we looked at all of those things last week as sort of a crown that's over Mother's crown. You see, it's all these highest principles that are there: samadhi, moksha, om, nirguna and saguna Brahman. Next week we'll probably also look at Jativada and Aparinama, the two great appendages off those pillars. That is, the birthless, deathless nature of the soul. We have to teach ourselves, or unteach ourselves, that about birth and death. And then non-transformation of things, or the apparent transformation of things, not getting hypnotized by change, by appearances, being able to penetrate through appearances and get to the stable principle that's underlying everything. So we'll look at that next week. But this week, let's pick up as Krishna says in the Gita, the thread of our yoga. We do that from lifetime to lifetime, those of us who are practicing this yoga of immersion into the ever-flowing rivers inside of us. The nadis, or the nerves, the currents of wisdom that are flowing. A lot of people are not acknowledging those. They don't see them. They flow right by. They're underground, as I said. So when one begins to see these currents, first you'll hear it as a current of words from your teacher, and they'll batter your ears, you see, and they'll cost the mind and the ego. And it's all a revolution going on, you see, a revolution of laziness, battling laziness, revolution of restlessness. A lot of people hear the teachings and they go, they get so restless they want to attain enlightenment tomorrow, you see. Or they want it right away, that quick fix again. And it's going to take a while for karmas from past lifetimes and from impressions from last lifetimes, they're called samskaras in the mind, to wear away. When Swamiji Vivekananda says, truth wears away soft things easy, quickly, lust, anger, greed, envy, all of the things that we're usually dealing with, emotionalism and so forth. Truth can get rid of that quickly if you take them to task and hear the truth. But the things that take a while are to burn through. The hard substances will be these karmas from past lifetimes, the samskaras that are a part of your mind, your brain-mind complex right now, and things like the gunas, which impose themselves on everyone, as I said, even on the great souls. Embodiment itself is a kind of difficulty. There's a teaching in the tradition which says that people build up a desire for embodiment. They have an addiction to prana. They don't even know what prana is, they're addicted to it. So it's life force. It's what gives you the enjoyment out of tasting food and out of seeing sights and hearing sounds. It's that energy that is really causing your enjoyment. So people get very attached to that. You can see why. They think that's all of life, even if they don't have a name for it. It's your energy, basically. Even science is sort of obsessed with energy. And so it's no surprise that occultists and metaphysicians and so forth will get sort of attached to subtle energy. That is psychic energy and prana and so forth. So that's the kind of addiction that's there in people. So that thirst for life is what Vivekananda called it. So when you want to break that chain, snap that chain, and quit being dragged from birth to death and death to birth, as he says in his Song of the Sannyasin, then you will start using that prana to go deeper and deeper and find these rivers of wisdom in you, these flows, these streams of consciousness, if you want to put it that way. And you'll align yourself with them, align the mind with them. So first, the words will have to strike your eardrums. And then, if they can penetrate in deeper over time, that's why you use time, then they will become manana. They'll become a sort of fine wine that you're rolling along the tongue of your mind, and getting just the right taste and the right pedigree and everything. You say, oh, that wine is 5,000 years old. Now you're talking about a very, very ancient amrit, nectar. And so a good realized philosopher or seer can think, oh, that's the Samkhya wine. That's one of the oldest and most cured of wines, you see. Or maybe that's more contemporary wine. See. So he'll have a way of judging by time and by taste. But it has to be a taste of the mind. That's where the five senses are all connected to, is this mind complex. So when that happens, then everything experiences a revolution. Senses go inward. Body even becomes healthy. We were just studying about that in 3:44 through 47 of Raja Yoga, if you all received it in the email a couple days ago. The third pada, 44th through 47th sutras, Patanjali is talking about the yogi's body and how it becomes clear complexion, a good voice, healthy all the time, and sit very easily, and can get into meditation quickly. So those are some of the attributes of a body-mind mechanism, or we call psychophysical being, that has been cured in yoga for a long time. So part of that curative process then is these darshanas we look into, the tastes of the mind. And we started looking at them last week with this new chart that I formulated called Astika and Nastika. Now that's on these pillars of our original chart we're using for this series of classes. Astika means traditional or orthodox, that is accepted by the orthodoxy, and Nastika means non-orthodox. And to repeat the teaching, just because it's non-orthodox in India, there's not a slight on it at all. There's no looking down the nose at it just because it doesn't follow traditional wisdom. Who could fault Lord Buddha for coming at a time, 550 years BC, and seeing that the people really, that the scriptures weren't available to them anymore in a pure form, and so he came up with the Four Noble Truths, and it's his own way of formulating. So Buddhism is in a Nastika tradition. It doesn't take its authority from the Vedas. And that's basically what you see here, which is a repeat of last week where we left off. Astika, orthodox systems, and Nastika, non-orthodox systems. Orthodox systems admit the existence of God. Not even just to admit it, but they actually stand up and teach about the presence of existence with a capital E. That is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is existence with a capital E. It's also a word for truth, reality. And then Chit is highest wisdom, and then Ananda is highest bliss. So Sat, Chit, Ananda is one of the most profound words in India for divine reality. Like I say, you don't have to necessarily use God or something like that. You could just say Satchitananda or say divine reality, and you're admitting the existence of something that is the core of your foundation of your own existence. It is existence. So the non-orthodox systems and the orthodox systems cannot really describe that. It's indescribable, so they point to it with these darshanas. Darshana means a way of clear seeing. And these darshanas happened throughout India's history for thousands and thousands of years pre-Christian era, before the Christian era, BCE. And they were flowing as rivers of wisdom, traditional wisdom, with their own scriptures and their own founders and their own avatars for time out of mind. It's been there. So it's very impressive when you look at it even historically. But when you begin to look at it philosophically, then you begin to get the real gist or depth of it. We know just from the people in this room and the people who are watching, many of them on the live streaming today, that Vedanta is one of those orthodox systems. And it's the one that Vivekananda brought here in 1893 and bestowed upon us. Said, you should all learn the Vedanta. Vedanta is more contemporary in many respects. That is, Vedas have been there forever, but Upanishads haven't. They're a little bit more current. Vedavyas gathered the last of them, and that's where we might as well show this chart again really quickly while we look at the Astika and Nastika. I showed it last week, but you can see the four Vedas, this one with its two divisions. That is Rig Veda, and Yajur Veda, and the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. And each one of those has its collection of Upanishads. Upanishads happened after the Vedas in a fourth level of teaching. That is, first were the rites and rituals, and then the songs, and then the teachings of renunciation, forest dweller teachings, where you went away from society and dwelled apart from it and contemplated the scriptures all the time. That were three stages of life there, and also three stages of history. And then finally you came to these beings who got realization from this process. See, it went by stages over time. And then the real insights came for about 500 years period, they say, when the Upanishads were given out by the beings who had studied the Vedas, sung the songs, taken the teachings, gone into a renunciate phase with them, away from society, in a cave, under a tree, in the wilderness, however you want, and thought about them very deeply and realized them as true, and passed them on to their children then. Then you started having the Upanishads come out. Oh, Daddy, oh, Mommy, you've obviously got so much wisdom. Why haven't you written it down? So finally they had to break their own rule, never to write it down, and began to come up with these transmissions. A lot of them were spoken first, verbal transitions, right to the child. So you didn't, like we're doing now, let's just throw books out and put them on computers, you see. You didn't do away with the original tradition. The books were very important, the scriptures were very important. You had a relationship with them. They were a part of your senses. You could hold them and you could read them with eyes. And then you had this combination of your father or grandfather or grandmother saying these scriptures to you and you repeating them back, sentence by sentence. And that would input them into your mind, and then they would do the commentary on each sentence, on each sloka, and then you would repeat the commentary. So it was very much like they teach music in India. You play a note on the flute, your teacher plays a note on the flute, you play the note on the flute back. And no, that's not quite good. And then they adjust the way you play it, and the tone, the length, the duration, the embouchure, and everything is learned by one note first. You can't even go on and play music yet, you see. You think you can just, let's pick up the flute and start playing, so you want the quick fix and you want to get straight to the fruits. But it's more very slow and very exacting how to actually think a tone before you play it. It doesn't even start with the lips resting on the flute or the bow resting on the violin. It starts with thinking the music first, see, knowing it first. Thought is father to the deed. So you are going to want to approach all of these arts, no matter what level they fall at, paravidya or aparavidya, higher wisdom or lower wisdom, by knowing them with the mind first. And then you engage in action and the whole process is smooth. A rain cloud of virtues can happen quicker. Remember that teaching from last week too, or a week before, about Kaivalya. That's another one of these aspects on the pillar, Kaivalya. So you want to be able to put all of this into your memory so that you will have it forever. It's called a divine memory. Some people come back to the body and they have a divine memory, not just of scripture, but even of having samadhi in a previous lifetime, or being a monk, or having awakened to spiritual truths that's already there in their mind, so it's easy to call forth again. So we're thinking of a continuum all the time, not just matter and energy that are in a continuum here. Thought and energy are also in a continuum. Intellect, intelligence, and mind are also in a continuum. And higher mind and lower mind are also in a continuum. So if that be the case, then we ought to get on board. Like we were saying this morning, someone asked, how do you get off the circles of birth and death, the wheels of birth and death? I said, by trading in old wheels for new. See, you get off of the wheel of suffering and sin and transgression and misery and all that, and you replace it with the wheel of morality. And then when morality and immorality get too much for you, you get off the wheel of morality onto the wheel of dharma, teachings. You don't judge yourself and say, I'm good, I'm bad, or I was good yesterday and I'm bad today. You put all that aside and you just sit there and say, there's the river of teachings. I think I'll let it wash over me, and maybe I'll quit brooding about good and bad after that. And I'll just think about what's better. And then from bad to good, and from good to better, and from better to best. Vivekananda says, you want to go from good to better to best. Well, that's those wheels that you're on. So you finally get off the wheel of better, which is dharma, the wheel of practice, sadhana. And that's the best wheel you can get on, because you yourself are in charge of your own destiny then. You're cutting yourself in the image. No God is going to do it for you. No devil is going to keep you from it. You yourself man your own ship, and you sail it across the ocean of existence under your own steam. That's called mastery. And you're going to have to get body, energy, called prana, mind, intellect, and ego all together on the same page. And that page is Atman, and that's in the book called Brahman. See? Divine reality is non-dual. I and my Father are one, that thou art. And so that's the end of all wheels. So that's not such a long answer to a question, how do I get off the wheel of birth and death, is it? It's just pretty much 4 or 5 steps. Or you could just put it in terms of from good to better to best. So the Upanishads are all about that then. You see, I can't resist reading once more the beautiful teaching that's there, that Vivekananda gave us. Sober-minded beings have become disgusted with superstitious religion and are looking to India for new light. How eagerly they take in any little bit of the grand thoughts of the holy Vedas, which resist and are unharmed by the terrible onslaughts of modern science. The theories of creation out of nothing, a created soul, and a big tyrant of a god sitting on a throne in a place called heaven, and of eternal hellfires have disgusted the educated. And the noble thoughts of the Vedas about the eternity of creation and the divinity of the soul, they are imbibing fast in one shape or another. It's just so beautiful to hear that said. It's not like many of us haven't already found that out, have already made our way towards the wisdom traditions and away from fundamentalism, and discarded such, as my teacher used to say, inappropriate, how did he say it, untenable, unacceptable tenets like hellfire, eternal hellfire, and 7-day creation theory. If you take them symbolically, yes, they have a place, but to take them literally, no. What you want to take literally is the teachings of the eternity of creation, the teaching of the divinity of the soul, that it's not sinful by nature, it's perfect by nature. It's the mind that becomes sinful, not the soul. And when the mind becomes sinful, it can also rescue itself, and needs to rescue itself from those transgressions under its own steam. So, from one wheel to the next, you have to make this journey. And that's going to be under your mastery of your energy, prana, breathing is part of that, and sitting, learning to sit in one position, not many hundreds of positions, twisting yourself like a pretzel or like an old dried up tree. One position is what you need, one breath or absence thereof, in case of kumbhaka or samadhi, and then one mind. It's all one. One position, one breath, one mind, and one great fact, one great truth that will set you free. And so, yes, everything is leading you back to the most economical of all attainments. So Christ, Buddha, those were beings with the most economy in them. They were most practical, most straight to the point, and as exemplars too, they were that. So you get a whole bunch of great souls together in India, you see, that doesn't happen very often. You don't find a whole bunch of really illumined souls together. You find a bunch of church fathers or a bunch of apostles, or but it's very rare to get a bunch of illumined souls together in one culture in one period of time. Although there's more periods of time here. But you could see then that's only proof of how it evolves, how it spreads, how it exudes, how it blossoms. See, this lotus they talk about, the symbolic lotus, you see, until it's got 1,000 petals. And Lord Brahma himself is taking seat on it, or better yet, Padma is taking seat on it. Sri Lakshmi, Divine Mother, like that, is taking her seat on it, you see. And then basically you've got many illumined souls in knowledge of her, instead of billions and billions of souls in ignorance of their true nature. So, to show this and to read this great quote by Vivekananda as a repeat from last week, lets us know what the Vedanta here, Uttara Mimamsa of Vedavyas, the Vedanta, is really based upon. Is it just a mere highfalutin philosophy? Or is it based upon scriptural knowledge? Shabda, it's called. It's one of the proofs of existence that we'll talk about later today. Shabda, testimony of the scriptures. See, that's even if you take it out of the realm of scripture and put it in the realm of TVs and websites and computers and so forth, everyone is relying on verbal testimony. Shabda means verbal testimony. It's just a matter of who's the authority here. You see, what level of verbal testimony is being accepted, or does the culture or the individual mind have the acumen to be able to judge higher knowledge and lower knowledge, to be able to see the distinction between that which is essential and that which is non-essential. We call that viveka in our tradition, discrimination between the real and the unreal. So if you have that, then verbal testimony is going to be very valuable to you. We'll talk more about that later. Now, to complete this chart, because it's not that vast of a study, and we've mentioned already one of the orthodox systems just now, Uttara Mimamsa of Vedavyas. Last week we also showed these. One of them that's familiar to everyone is yoga. When we say yoga, remember we want to point specifically to the eight-limbed yoga, not to the current craze of Hatha yoga, which is pretty much all physical. And that's just one very small element of the picture. But the Raja yoga, or the Patanjala yoga, or the Ashtanga yoga, those are actually names for the same yoga, eight-limbed, royal, and founded by Patanjali. You can pick your title for it there. But if you say Ashtanga yoga, eight-limbed yoga, and you know what the eight limbs are, because I've attended upon people teaching yoga classes who call it Ashtanga yoga and they're only doing one limb, and I asked them, where are the other seven limbs? Do you know what Ashta means? Like Ashtanga Marga, the eightfold path of Buddha, or the Ashtanga yoga, the eight-limbed yoga of Patanjali. You have to know these things. And if you do, you'll know what the higher limbs are. And you won't settle for just the trunk or sitting around lazily at the foot of the tree, never climbing. You'll start to climb, and you'll begin to work your way toward that fifth limb. That fifth limb is called pratyahara. It means being able to detach yourself from the objects of the senses, especially as they appear in your mind in meditation. If you can do that, if you can take your mind off of form, then the sixth, seventh, and eighth limbs and samyama is called, are more of an open book to you. Concentration, meditation, and samadhi, called samadhi being here, you see, listed. So how do we get to samadhi? By stages again, by limbs. And what's the greatest impediment? For the ordinary person, getting rid of attachment to the body, hatha, is the hardest impediment. But for the wiser person, pratyahara is going to be the main problem in yoga. Or you might say first, getting a hold of your prana, and then using it to master pratyahara level. That is, that with my prana, I get more interested in inward things. And therefore, I can begin to take my mind off of external objects. Now I only have to accost the inner worlds and the inner objects and transcend those. So that's all well known in Ashtanga yoga. So this particular darshana is very popular nowadays. We want to maybe not popularize, but make it familiar with everyone about these other seven limbs of yoga, not just the physical side. Especially the first two, called yamas and niyamas. We want people to know the importance of truth, satyam. We want them to practice ahimsa, non-violent, because that would be, that's not being practiced in the West at all, in our government, in our business. Competition is a kind of violence against others. Anything that doesn't ameliorate That is, heal rifts between souls and make them get behind and support each other. That's nonviolence, not just whether I eat meat or not, which is another consideration. You might want to treat your fellow creatures around you and the environment better if you want to practice nonviolence to the hilt. Or even look into Jainism. It's one of the unorthodox systems here, right? Jainism of Mahavir, the Tirthankaras, 24 Tirthankaras or so that went way back in time before Buddha. So Jainism and its nonviolence is very, very exquisite, and you know, probably a better word for it than saying extreme, like making sure you don't kill a bug and not even breathe a microbe. There are reasons for those things that aren't just about birth and death, because Jainism was raised in India and it knows that the soul is birthless and deathless. So even knowing that, they're going to be very, very nonviolent. And it's a part of the yamas and niyamas of yoga, you see. You don't want any karma to accrue from acts done in the body. Acts done outside the body, after you're free, they're not going to impede you. See, they're not going to make no never mind. But acts done here in the body under the rules of relativity, karma, those impede everyone. There's a karma that's always to be paid by taking on the body. Holy Mother said that. You must pay the amount to the last farthing of taking on the physical body. Everyone who enters into it has to pay to the last farthing. So its embodiment is then something to be encountered again on the level of violence or nonviolence. Do I want to take this body nonviolently and not subject anyone else to any kind of violence? One of my favorite sayings in the Gita is, that one who does not afflict the world and whom the world cannot afflict, that one is my precious child. Krishna says. He does not afflict the world and the world cannot afflict him. See? So he keeps his, how do they saying nowadays? The spaces, you see. They respect the space of others. And they keep everything at a distance. See? Basically, you want to embrace the whole world in your love, but you don't want to embrace their ignorance. That cannot be done. See? Ignorance can be taken on and paid for, like the avatars do, but it's not something that they want to do. Shiva didn't want to drink the poison of relativity that turned his throat blue. He had to, because the poison had gotten so bad it was eating through the foundation of all the worlds. But Divine Mother was there to save him. She pressed on his throat so the poison wouldn't get into his digestive system, destroy him. So, yes, we want to love all beings. May the Lord save all beings, but may the Lord save me from their ignorance. That is something we do not want to take on. We want to remain in the state of non-dual awareness, in higher wisdom. And the Dharma is helping us do that. The Dharma will be our floodgate. See, close it and open it as you will. Close it against samsara pragbara, the dam of ignorance, and open it to koivalya pragbara, the flow of wisdom. That's a teaching from the most ancient of all these darshanas, Sankhya Yoga. Now, of these darshanas, you have three that are currently available to you: Vedanta, Yoga, and Sankhya. Those three of the six are on the scene. Probably the one that's mostly on the scene is Vedanta, because yoga, as I say, is not being studied as an 8-limb system so much as it is as just a form of body craze right now, attachment to the body and attachment to physical health. So what's really on the scene now is Vedanta here, and then the Nastika Buddhism is on the scene. Vedanta and Buddhism, if I could paraphrase Swami Vivekananda, says there is no difference between them. Vedanta and Buddhism teach the same things. The differences will just be in words and this difference, Astika and Nastika. See, one takes the Vedas literally and takes them, the truth of them, and uses them to transmit the Dharma, and the Buddhist path goes towards the Four Noble Truths But the same kinds of things that Vedanta is teaching too are in the Four Noble Truths. The same kind of reincarnation process that's in Buddhism as the 12 links is there in the Vedanta and in its explication of karma and reincarnation. And the interdependence of all things, interdependent arising, see, and how to get free of it is also there both in Vedanta and Buddhism. So the Astika and Nastika principle is not a rub. It's not something for competition or for debate. It's something to recognize as existing in different time periods. Buddhism being fairly recent, 550 years before Christ, is very recent compared to Kapila's Sankhya, which was years before that. Yet Buddha was born in Kapilavastu, Kapila's birthplace. That was where he was born, which is now, I think, a part of Nepal rather than a part of India, because the borders have changed. Such is Maya. But nonetheless, you can't take away that fact that Sankhya Yoga is very ancient and teaches those precious truths of Purusha, the sentient soul, and Prakriti, the insentient energy, nature energy. See, those two are separate, abiding realities that are connected to one another. So it's a very qualified, dualistic kind of philosophy that laid the foundation for teachings that yoga, Buddhism, and Vedanta were later to give us. That's how important it is. Now these other three are of, a lot of them have been worked into Vedanta already. The Purva Mimamsa of Jaimini and the Nyaya and the Vaisheshika of Kannada, of Gautama and Kannada. You'll find a lot of those worked into Vedanta already, and there's a good segue into Pramana, because a lot of the teachings of Nyaya and Vaisheshika are there in the proofs of reality. That's where you'll find a lot of the distilled teachings of Gautama and Kannada still there, as if Vedanta just sort of borrowed them and interlaced them with what was going on, took the essence out of those two darshanas and worked them into its fold. But before we go there, and we already read the quote last week, it bears repeating too. Basically, everyone has borrowed from Mother India throughout long phases of time, as there has been an endless sweep of religious philosophies and pathways emanating from her. In other words, not just one sacred book or one single prophet, but many, many of each. And within this plethora of spiritual avenues, there has always been room for those who profess the existence of divine reality, as well as those who do not care to admit it or emphasize it. In other words, sometimes it gets in the way to always have to mention God. God becomes a word bantered around commonly, as if you were bargaining for fascia greens in the marketplace, Holy Mother says. You cannot speak Brahman. You can only point to it, which is what these proofs of religion are about. They're pointers towards the existence of Brahman without saying anything about the existence of Brahman. In Buddhism, for instance, Buddha was asked, does God exist? And he said, did I say God existed? Then, does God not exist? And he said, did I say God doesn't exist? So he was non-committal as to the existence of God. You have in Judaism and in Islam a great reticence to even give a name to reality. So we have Jehovah and we have Yahweh and we have Allah, but very sparse as far as any kind of name, and very tentative about pinning a name to reality, because it's nameless and formless. Even the Vedanta says that out the gate, you see. So you have to be very careful about that so that people don't get turned off, and more importantly, probably philosophically, they don't begin to assign form to the formless reality. That's really the problem, is that then you begin to talk nonsense like gods and devils and angels and ancestors and all of these things, which have a place of existence in the mind, but which are not the reality. They're forms. And then pretty soon you end up wanting to go to the realm of your ancestors called heaven. Why would you want to do that? It's no different than here. Your ancestors are here too, and you're enjoying and suffering here too. Do you think heaven is a place of more enjoyment and less suffering? Not when you have to come back out of it. See? Because you go to heaven and you return to earth. That's been a clear teaching in Buddhism and in Vedanta, in yoga and in Samkhya from the very get-go, long before Christ visited this earth in that particular form. So we have to look more toward these wisdom traditions to clear things like this up for us, so that philosophically we're sound. That's what these darshanas and these proofs do for us, which is what we're entering into, in case you haven't noticed it, today and this afternoon after the break. Before the break, though, let's try and complete this chart. So we've looked at the orthodox systems and mentioned them. They admit the existence of God, but the asterisk here on Samkhya means that Kapila never really admitted the existence of God. Samkhya was very non-committal, one of those darshanas that was very non-committal. He just mentioned Purusha, the eternal soul, and Prakriti, the eternal material energy principle. One was sentient, the other was insentient. And then how the two interact with each other, Purusha with Prakriti, was the rub, you see, was the potential problem. Suffering comes out of that. Remember, pleasure is a kind of suffering. So India has always known this. If you have a duality, then you're ping-ponging back and forth between it, good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death. It goes on forever in relativity, so you're not really in a state of absolute peace yet, absolute bliss yet, absolute wisdom, non-duality. You don't know what that is yet. That's precisely why you don't give a name to it. You have to kind of know it first, and you can say, oh, it is I. Let's just call it by one letter. It is myself. See? Like Vivekananda said beautifully, I'm a Vedantist. I hardly know any other God anywhere than myself. See? So he probably said hardly because he had met Sri Ramakrishna, his guru. So being a Vedantist, you know the self is God. I and my Father are one, and you're coming out the gate with that. You see, like it's the racehorse, the racetrack. You see, you come out the gate, right? And there's all these different factions, but one of them is the winner. I'm the indweller in the city with 9 gates. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 apertures in the body. Purusha. See, so I'm the indweller that operates the senses. And the senses have their relationship with Prakriti, the objects, nature. But the observer stays apart from the process of Purusha and Prakriti. The soul and its preoccupation with, its identification with, or better, its association with, because there's all 3 levels there. People get completely attached and forget themselves. Other people get mixed up and then extricate themselves. And that's the 9 that fight, right? But this one who stays as the observer to the whole thing, Purusha and Prakriti, you know, that would be Atman, or the seer, the Sakshi Bhutam, the witness of all phenomena, totally detached and in a state of bliss all the time, like an old warrior who quit the battle and sat on the top of the hill, and the only interest he had was seeing who won, you see, and then seeing who the winner become evil and turn against another army, and then they become the loser. You see, they just watch this whole play of Maya go on back and forth, and nothing really gets distilled out of it. It's all vanity and vexation of spirit. But he doesn't care because he's not a part of it. See, he's observing. Every once in a while, if he wants to help souls who show the right attitude, who are interested in the Dharma, come out, teach them. Take a body, see. And that's going to be at a great price for all involved. But yet that's the best thing to do if you're going to be embodied, is to help people get free. Free from what? Free from ignorance. Why? Because it causes suffering. So that's my explanation of out the gate, you see. Even before you start into the race of Maya, if you're holding on to this knowledge of Brahman, I am, my Father are one, this self is Brahman, then you're fine, you see. You can take as many incarnations as you want, as some of these, even souls living today, have been doing. So something there about this Samkhya asterisk, you see. The asterisk is about Kapila's non-committalness about the existence of reality. He did mention Purusha, however. In yoga, much the same way, hardly mentions anything about God, but he does mention Ishvara, the Supreme Soul. So from those small mentions from these great souls like Kapila and Patanjali, we infer that they're orthodox. They do know somewhere inside of them and affirm the divine nature of reality. Whereas hard to find proof of that in Jainism and Buddhism. They're focused on something other than trying to prove the existence of God. It is its own proof, in other words, I think, is what Lord Buddha was saying when he said that he didn't mention God exists, and nor did he affirm its non-existence. That's basically the idea. Now, just when we reached the end of the clock last week, we were about ready to classify the scriptures. Now, we already classified the scriptures a little bit with the idea of Vedanta. Vedanta is all this. That is Veda and Anta. Veda is the four Vedas, which are the main scriptures of India, and Anta means the Upanishads. So this chart pretty much shows you everything scripturally that is in the Vedanta. 108 Upanishads left. There must have been hundreds and hundreds more before the end of that age when Vedavyas, who is now called the father of Vedanta, you see right here, Uttara Mamamsa Vedavyas, grabbed onto those final 108 and kept them on record, writ them down. So Vedanta has that. Now in the Yoga Sutras we have what we've been studying lately over the last, I think, 5 to 10 years we've been in it, the Yoga Sutras. And those are pretty much the mead of the yogi as far as scripture is concerned in the darshana of yoga. So each one of these have their scriptures. Samkhya, the scriptures are almost gone. They're so ancient that we only have one, maybe two left. And actually SRV comes together and has retreats on Samkhya Yoga. I think we have one next year even coming up. And we take one of the scriptures of the remaining scriptures of Samkhya and study it and go through all the teachings of that. Now as far as classification of scriptures, there's Shruti, which means to hear. Or let's put it this way, it must be heard. They want you to hear the Upanishads because those are the testaments of the seers who had the insight called realization that turned them into enlightened beings. So you must hear the Upanishads. They're very important in that. That's Vedas, Upanishads, and Gita. There's another one you could put in there called the Brahma Sutras, and there are a few others more current called Ashtavakra Samhita, Avadhuta Gita. They all fall under this heading, I believe, of Shruti, that must be heard, that must be read, that must be studied. Read and studied is good. Best is to hear them from the lips of an illumined soul and then take them into your mind, manana, as I said, and work them around in your mind over a long period of time. That qualifies you for these darshanas. And you have to do that with each one. If you're a Buddhist, you're going to have to look into all the scriptures and sutras and spend some time with them and imbibe the teachings. Best doing it from a lama or a Rinpoche or that kind of thing. And same from a Roshi in Zen Buddhism, as today is Zen Buddhist Day. So those are important for qualification. Now there's Smriti. That means the Itihasa, the Puranas, and the Agamas, and the Tantras, the Darshanas, and the Dharma Shastras. All of these are levels of Itihasa. Itihasa is third nature. Smriti is secondary. Shruti is primary. The third nature doesn't mean that it's of any less importance. Really, what it means is it's more easily understandable for most people. Itihasa means scriptural history, basically. And by going back and hearing the stories of Ram and Sita and Hanuman and Lakshmana and Ravana. In the Ramayana, for instance, that's Itihasa. But you'll find a version of the Ramayana called the Adhyatma Ramayana, in which all of the extra has been taken out, and it's been, the storyline is still there, but it's been formed into a condensed version which keeps all the non-dual teachings of the Ramayana. This is exactly an Upanishad then, so really you could call Adhyatma Ramayana an Upanishad of the Shruti kind. That's how you could say Itihasa and Shruti exist side by side and work off of each other. It's never a matter of classifying in levels to prove superiority or inferiority of something, see. It's more a matter of taking it apart and looking at it, and each one being a complementary of the others. Prati Tantra Siddhanta is a way of taking the scriptures apart so that you can argue about which one is better and which one's worse. It's never a very good way to go. But Sahaja Tantra Siddhanta is a way of uniting them and using them as parts of a working whole. See, you only take them apart to see their individual contributions, then you put them back together and watch the whole thing roll. See, it's a comprehensive way of approaching philosophy. And in between that is a kind of siddhanta or conclusion that means let's pose one religion, bring them all together and try and unite them, you see, or try and make them friendly with one another. And that's also not a superior way. It's rather ad nauseum nowadays to try and bring together these religions. And it may be a stage of things, but you should see them as facets of the same diamond. When you're looking at these 6 darshanas, there's no doubt that the Vedanta has the advantage, Yuttara Mimamsa has the advantage of having non-duality fully developed and on its side, whereas back in the ancient times, Samkhya of Kapila probably didn't have that advantage. And it was working with a level of mind and a culture at that period of time that needed to hear other things. One of the greatest things about Samkhya is that it does propose two-ness, that the soul and nature are 2 different realities. Now that's a rub as far as non-duality is concerned. You don't want to, you can't put nature and soul together like oil and water and try and mix it up. It's going to separate. So, but isn't that pretty much why the Samkhya is so valuable to us? Because it does allow us to separate the two and study them as individual realities, or in order so that we find out that nature has come out of the soul. How would we have found that out if we hadn't have cleared the field like Kapila did and made it obvious that there was a sentient principle and an insentient principle, and pretty much that is the Advaita of Samkhya, as far as I'm concerned. The very fact that he did that wasn't proof that he was trying to prove 2 different realities. It was he was trying to take them apart to show that one came out of the other, that nature comes out of you, that the universe comes out of mind, that objects come out of intelligence. So there's a forerunner to everything that's in form. That, to me, is the real efficacy of studying the Samkhya deeply and over again, to remind yourself of that. So there you see Puranas, Agamas, which are really the Tantras, another name for them, the Darshanas and the Dharma Shastras, very important teachings that you'll get if you frequent circles, satsang, in sanghas. Sangha means a spiritual circle, and especially in Indian circles, Indian philosophy, Vedanta and so forth, yoga, you'll begin to hear shlokas, sutras, and wisps of knowledge out of the Dharma Shastras, out of the Tantras, out of the Agamas and so forth, or the Puranas, and you'll wonder at the breadth and depth of Vedanta. But what you're seeing there is really a lot of other things that are also have been requisitioned, you see, and have been brought into the greater, sometimes what we're calling nowadays Neo-Vedanta, the new Vedanta that Vivekananda has brought forward to us. So I think enough about the top half of this chart. I've tried to make it as readily available and as inspiring as I can. Of course, the real inspiration is in you reading them and applying your own consciousness to them, because that makes them live. They have come out of the consciousness of the seers, and so then your own consciousness will also shed light on them. Now, if we talk about the Vedas, we look at the Vedanta specifically, this bottom half of the chart I put together called the Vedas, and there are two divisions. One's called the Karma Kanda, and one is called the Jnana Karma. Karma Kanda is the various acts. There you see them here. The Samhitas are the collection of mantras and hymns. They correspond with youthful stage. That is where you're practicing celibacy as a brahmacharya. And that, of course, is acknowledged as a stage in the East, but in America, when I was growing up through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, all the youth pretty much were sort of on their own honor system to practice celibacy, but not necessarily everyone was doing it. But it wasn't put forward as something that you did as a stage of life, a celibate student life, where you studied scriptures and observed the yamas and niyamas to the letter, and therefore qualified yourself at the level of the first two limbs of yoga. We don't have that kind of teaching when we're growing up in the West, so there's then a lot of, how they say, stray bullets flying around our society in the case of many souls who didn't get these clarifying teachings. So the Samhitas are a kind of portion of the Karma Kanda. Karma means, the path of action, is what you're, as compared to or correlated with sometimes Jnana Karma, the path of wisdom. So the Samhitas, those early mantras and hymns that we discussed about the Vedas, they correspond with the early brahmacharya stage. Now the Brahmanas, sacrificial rites, duties, modes of conduct, corresponds with the grihastha stage. That is, pretty much you could call that making a living stage, merchant, grihastha. So they also have to do sacrificial rites, they have to keep up religious duties, and they have to observe modes of conduct. So this is how the four-caste system in India lasted so long. Nowadays it's like, oh, let's criticize it because the fifth caste came along and the fourth caste system broke down. But you should start looking at thousands of years previous to the breakdown of the caste system and how long that stayed in place and how wonderful a principle it was in India, how it kept India's scriptures, for instance, still available for us and pure. See, they weren't interpolated. So that kind of internal purity that is there is basically due to the brahmacharyas and the grihastas, that is, people in business and youth, practicing sacrificial rites and doing their duties and observing modes of conduct like the yamas and niyamas. That keeps the society from deteriorating for a long, long time, we should say. Now, Samhitas, first part of Vedanta, Brahma, that is the Vedas, Brahmanas, second part. Aranyakas were the third part. I mentioned them, forest dwellers, is the word they kind of borrow from that, or Vanaprastha. We like to bring out Vanaprastha if we're not monks particularly, because that's the fourth stage, Jnana Karma. Kanda is the monastic stage, basically, generally speaking. But we like to bring out the teaching of Vanaprasthan for people who are the forest dwellers of contemporary times. That is, many of us are living on the periphery of society and just working with society from a detached way. That is, we're probably not going to parties and drinking and smoking and doing the things that society is doing out there because we've found a finer nectar to imbibe than alcohol and various things like that. Our intoxicants are different than theirs, so you put it that way. We have developed this taste for the fine wine of scripture and historical scripture. All of the scriptures mentioned here and what they reflect and how they came out of the minds of the seers is all just this invisible to most people Dharma. When you come upon the Dharma, remember you've gotten off the wheel of morality and immorality, and you had to get onto that wheel by giving up transgressions, worldliness, mundane human convention, transgressions, evil doings, and so forth. Those were wheels that you got off on until you got onto this wheel of Dharma. So the Dharma is practically invisible to a greater percentage of people, but yet that's the secret of people living in peace. That's the secret of peace of mind. That's the secret of a dharmic life, is to be aware of this invisible teaching that's going on a different level of consciousness than most people are operating at. So you're going to have to raise yourself up out of that level of consciousness. I know this by direct experience because I have students that I see move from worldliness closer to spirituality, and they do it by steps, and finally some of them succeed in actually sloughing off, like a snake does its skin, the problem of worldliness, and they begin to get tired of their old ways of life, their old habits. They become world weary. That's actually a word that's used in the scriptures. And it doesn't satisfy them anymore to be doing the same things they were doing. So they need to have somewhere to go. And that's when the teachings and the teachers are there for them, and the Sangha members are there for them to usher them into this higher level of consciousness. It's very precious, and it's worth keeping. That alone is worth keeping the Dharma going. What to speak of just you enjoying it on some other level. We have ours, devil take the hindmost kind of idea. Yes, we do. We can leave the world behind, and will when it's time. Or maybe we already have, and like a Vanaprasthan, we're just dwelling on the periphery of it and helping it as we can from a detached place. So some words of contemporary Vanaprasthan stage, which are going to be householders that have either had no children, or their children have grown up, been taught, and left the fold, left the family, and they're on their own. And maybe these beings also own no property, like monks. And so money is not their main preoccupation. They can subsist on what comes naturally without investing too much in politics, business, and merchant stage and all that. And so they can just remain in this kind of subtle level, kind of precarious level of maintaining themselves just outside of society. That's a Vanaprasthan. So if you have not found yourself to be either a householder or a monk, there's a middle way there that you can probably begin to adopt and adapt to, and call yourself a Vanaprasthan. So that's very important teaching for this particular time in America. It says here, inner meaning of the brahmanas and rules for forest dwellers. So you're going to have to know the inner meaning of the sacrifices, but not necessarily have to do them anymore. You're going to have to know the inner meaning of the duties and the rites and rituals, but not necessarily engage in them anymore. That is, you can take them or leave them because you know the inner meaning of them. So if you have learned the puja, how to worship God with form in images, now you can do it in your mind. You don't have to do it at the altar anymore, although you might go on doing that just as an example to others. But basically, everything is now going on in your mind. That's a Vanaprasthan stage. And you're able to distill the nectar of wisdom out of that process in your mind. So it's not poison exuding anymore that you have to worry about. It's nectar exuding, and you have to learn how to distribute it to people. Here, you take a little bit of this nectar. Here, you take some. Here, you take some. And take it on the level that you can digest it, you see. No, you can't have any. Sorry, you're not ready. See? I'm looking at a blank space here because all these people are imbibing. So basically, that's one of the arts there at the level of the Aranyakas or the Vanaprasthan. You could spend a lot of time on that particular stage because a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s are actually heading somewhere, and it's a way of defining, if you will, where they're heading, rather than just saying, oh, I don't have children, and and responsibilities anymore, so I can, paint pottery. Now, I always wanted to do that, see, or I can join my bingo club, you see, or whatever, but now, actually I have somewhere to go that's more like a noble, you see, for an older person. Old age doesn't mean silliness, I hope, and forgetfulness, and Alzheimer's. And so I'll never give way to that. Knock on wood. Come in. So we should never become invested with ideas that I'm sick or I'm diseased just because I'm old. We should be imbibing the Dharma all the time and keeping our minds in a noble place. The mind will live forever. The body can come and go as it wishes. And in fact, the mind, in my tradition, produces as many bodies as it wants, because God does not produce bodies. God is formless. Leave it there. Nature produces bodies, and your mind, together with nature, is going to produce the fetus in the womb, with the contribution of the sperm of the husband and the egg of the wife. So basically, this is going to be your detached witness position, that you are consciousness alone, and that you come into the body, like Kapila said, Purusha into Prakriti, soul into nature, and associate there, and then detach yourself when the time comes. This is a good art form to be engaged in. So you're talking about somebody who is done with student studies, done with rites and rituals and business, and they've come to a place where they want to retire from most activities and place their mind on more noble things, more noble undertakings. And they have the time to do it. Hopefully they've brought their activities to a good, fruitful closure. And then now they can keep engaging in these spiritual rites and rituals that they've been doing ever since they were making money. That is, making money is a kind of sacred ritual, if you do it right. It's called dharmic money. It's not worldly money, it's dharmic money. And you make sure that that's shared amongst certain ends, like raising a dharmic family or supporting spiritual organizations that are teaching the Dharma. Those are all very powerful things. Now, before the break here, which is just a couple minutes away, let's look at the Jnana Kanda. That's the Upanishads, which you see stretched out here over this field. That is this sannyas stage, they call it. The monks, the swamis, for instance, in India, they're called sannyasins, and they're practicing the Jnana Kanda specifically. They've probably been doing that since they were young. It's the secret teaching for those who are ready to renounce the world. It corresponds with the sannyas stage. I could recite for you by memory the 11 or 12 verses of the Song of the Sannyasin if there were time, but it pretty much outlines everything about have thou no home, and no food or drink can taint the noble self that knows itself, and strike off the fetters of chains of birth and death. And there's a whole bunch of very eternal and authentic teachings of non-duality that form the content of the Song of the Sannyasin, or the Jnana Kanda. So that, of course, is what we admire when we go to these great teachers who are monks, and learn from them in what they've gleaned from this long, long time spent in study of the scriptures, and with their gurus too. The Guru Parampara lineage, passing on from guru to disciple and disciple to the next disciple and so forth. That is there, very obvious in that line of sannyas. Now let's end here this chart with the final sloka. Lord Brahma was once meditating on his creator, when there was manifest within the shrine of his heart the eternal word Om, the seed of all knowledge and thought. One by one then came the sounds of all the letters, and through these letters there became known to Brahma the wisdom of the Vedas. He then taught it to his disciples, and these in turn spread it to the many worlds. Now, there are many great teachings around this in the Itihasa, about Lord Brahma sitting in the lotus, and Divine Mother, his creator, coming to him and saying, spread the wisdom now, start the cycle. And she gives him the seed letters, Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim, Klim, Krim, Hum, Fat, Swaha. All of these basically powerful letters in Sanskrit that are correlated with the creative process, which is really a projection process. So she gives him these, and then he broadcasts them, you see, to his children, his mind-born souls like Vishishta and others. And then they spread it to their disciples, and that begins the trickle-down process, comes on down to the gods and the goddesses, and the gods and goddesses pass it on to the celestials, and the celestials on to the ancestors, and all the way out to humans. Hopefully we get it too, this rainfall of divine nectar, Amrit, that comes from knowledge of the scriptures, that we can qualify ourselves in and then attain the supreme goal, as Buddha said, the gata paragatam, and reach the supreme goal of human life and existence. So that's a beautiful quote about Lord Brahma and the whole Guru Parampara lineage, how it transmits from station to station, if you will, that is station of consciousness, and will come right on down here in the form of powerful words that get transmitted to people with not only open ears, but open hearts and open minds, the two wings of the bird, Bhakti and Jnanam. So here we will pause for our break, and we will go on to talk about the proofs of existence after the break. So stay with us in this 15 or 10 minute break. Namaste. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.